Princess Anne. She may be the hardest working royal, but when it comes to her love life, she's far from a fairy tale princess.
I'm not totally useless. I was quite well educated, one way or another.
She said, "I will marry the man I choose, no matter who he is or what he does."
From intense press speculation,
there was an awful lot of interest in who she was seeing and what this might mean for the monarchy,
to a love triangle with the future queen.
She doesn't seem concerned about etiquette from the palace's point of view.
And public scandal for a very private princess.
Divorce? Very much.
Never been mentioned.
Mark was having an affair of his own. He fathered an illegitimate child.
Tonight, royal experts and insiders reveal how Anne's 7 love affairs show us what she's really like.
In many ways, Anne was a trailblazer.
Why did she choose these men?
By his account, she was lonely, and he provided that companionship.
And despite lies, affairs and divorce,
I have no comment to make on the news at all.
how has Anne managed to keep her royal reputation intact?
She is very shrewd. She knows how to keep information away from the press.
Scandal, controversy, and romance. These are the loves of Anne's life. Sir Timothy Lawrence is the man we're used to seeing by Princess Anne's side.
Out of all the royals, Princess Anne does seem probably one of the happiest, happily married, very settled, no drama, no impropriety.
The marriage spans 28 years, and as this recently revealed cosy, candid photo shows, they're clearly still very happy together.
I think a lot of people think that she's always been married to the same person.
Anne may be in a stable relationship now, but it's been a long journey to get there. She had a rumoured 7 relationships, each different from the last.
Princess Anne's past is, to say the least, colourful. I mean, we know that she had 7 boyfriends. She was the first royal child to divorce. She married a commoner. She just was rebellious. Some of the boyfriends were considered incredibly unsuitable.
This story begins whilst she was still in her youth, and perhaps the world's most eligible princess. And when the press reported Anne's very first boyfriend, it seemed like a perfect royal match.
Gerald Ward was a friend of the royal family, a great friend of Prince Charles.
He was regarded as suitable, if you like, by the palace. Educated at Eton. The family had land in Wiltshire.
But at 12 years older than 18-year-old Anne, what was it about Gerald that really attracted her to him?
He was drawn to a good rider, a good horseman.
Her love for horses was almost all-consuming when she was young. Her father said once, if it doesn't fart and eat hay, she's not interested.
They were spotted together shortly after Princess Anne finished her A-levels at boarding school. So this really puts her at, the age of 18, really quite young, feeling out these new relationships and kind of figuring out who she was.
It's no surprise that her romance with Gerald fizzled out quickly.
I think Anne felt she was being sort of pushed, slightly nudged towards this eminently suitable character. And I think she was very young. He was a good bit older. He was too tweedy.
It was clear from early on that the young, strong-minded princess wasn't willing to let social expectations dictate her romantic life.
Anne was always clear. She said, "I will marry the man I choose, no matter who he is or what he does."
If you had not met a man whom you wanted to marry, do you think you would have married out of a sense of duty?
No way.
She'd led quite a sheltered life, and she needed to explore. She wanted to enjoy life.
The romance was over quickly, but their connection didn't end there. Gerald marked the start of an unusual pattern Anne had with most of her ex-partners.
Although their relationship did not last, she remained on very good terms with him, as did the rest of the family.
Gerald actually ended up being one of Prince Harry's godparents.
The fallout from Gerald showed Anne just how desperate the press were for stories about her love life. She was forced to come up with ways to keep her private life private.
She resented the fact that the press would be interested in finding out who her boyfriends were. It also led to this sort of rather difficult relationship that she's had with the media over the years. She often came across as rather prickly, short-tempered.
Of course, it's
Anne noted this struggle in a Parkinson interview, in typical comedic fashion.
Do you ever regret what you say to them? I mean, the report that went around the world was you told one photographer to naff off, I think it was. Do you wish to retract your choice of words, or...?
No. Well, there was several of them, actually.
Telling the press to leave her alone didn't always work. They soon got wind of another love affair. As quickly as Anne had shrugged off Gerald Ward, she picked up boyfriend number 2, who, unlike Gerald, was certainly not a conventional royal escort.
The things that Sandy Harper did, the way he behaved, the way he dressed, that it set off alarm bells throughout the establishment, because although he had this background which was vaguely acceptable, he dressed very much like a hippie. He had long hair, he wore, because she'd escaped the sort of tweedy world which was still core to the royal family.
After the eminently suitable Gerald Ward, Sandy was a breath of fresh air for the rebellious princess. Not a military man or an aristocrat, but a professional polo player whom she met through her love of horses.
They were seen out at the discotheques that were springing up all over London in the late 60s and early 70s. I think one of the most striking things about it is that after an evening out, it was often Princess Anne who drove them home afterwards. She liked men who were fun, and she liked to be amused and entertained, people who were prepared to take a bit of a risk in their private life.
The relationship told the world that Anne wasn't prepared to play by the royal rules. She was not a conventional princess, which she wryly admitted herself in the famous Parkinson interview.
I didn't really fit somehow the image that the media thought I ought to have. I think, princesses, as you come in sort of fairy story, That's what they are, and somehow I didn't fit.
Luckily for the stuffier types at the palace, neither Sandy nor Anne saw a future in their wild romance.
He was a bit of a self-confessed ladies' man. He did do an interview where he said, I take a lot of girls out and the relationships don't work out.
I think probably that was the most exciting time of her life, in a way, but she knew it couldn't last. So she knew it was almost like she was being allowed to play for a while before the serious business of being a grown-up royal had to begin.
By age 20, speculation about Anne's love life was rife, and when rumoured boyfriend number 3 hit the headlines, it seemed Anne was open to becoming a grown-up royal.
Richard Meade was another extremely accomplished horseman, and in fact one of our most decorated Olympians.
His love of horses, that rivalled even hers, seems to have been a huge attraction for Anne. But unlike Sandy before him, Richard also had an understanding of her royal life.
Meade was definitely part of that approved social set that it was okay for the royals to mix with, because they knew his background, they knew his family. He was also quite discreet, which is obviously something that the royals really take quite seriously, and she really wouldn't have been interested in someone that fawned over her and her royal status. But I think for her the main thing would have been someone that could deal with her no-nonsense attitude.
Richard seemed to be the favourite for the princess's hand.
I think there was a lot more talk about Richard Meade as a potential husband for Anne than there had been hitherto about anyone else.
But Anne's own father had his doubts.
Richard Meade, who indeed was a friend of mine, he was unfortunately 12 years older than the princess, age gap between the two, so he was discouraged.
Anne was just 20, and Richard may have been just too grown up for the young princess. She seems to have listened to her father, and after less than 2 years, the pair parted ways.
She was in no great hurry. Times had changed. She was not under pressure to marry. She didn't have to produce an heir to the throne. It gave her a degree of freedom that her brother never really had to enjoy. And she was determined to enjoy it. And if that meant dating 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 men before she married, then so be it.
Richard Meade, he became quite a close friend. They could go on horse events together, and his children became very friendly with Prince William and Prince Harry. So she wasn't spiteful, she wasn't bitter.
Next, Anne's most risky romance has been under wraps for years, involving a complicated love quadrangle.
He would have been a complete no-no for the royal family.
The story of Anne's most controversial relationship that sent shockwaves through the royal circle remains largely untold. By age 20, Anne had met rumoured boyfriend number 4.
Andrew Parker Bowles, I think, was a serious contender, a very distinguished army officer as well, and a very great favourite of the Queen. And his relationship with the royal family goes back so far, he was actually in the procession at the Queen's coronation.
I think she was very intrigued by him. He was a very suave, sophisticated figure, much more experienced in the ways of the world than the men she'd hitherto been dating.
But there was one slight problem. Anne wasn't the only woman Andrew was seducing.
The name is familiar, of course, because he was dating a young woman called Camilla Shand, who became Camilla Parker Bowles and is now, of course, the wife of the Prince of Wales. But he was also seeing a lot of other women in his spare time.
It was thought that when he cheated on Camilla with Princess Anne, that Camilla decided to get a bit of revenge, and that was when she actually started up her own relationship with Prince Charles.
Thus began Anne's best-kept secret, a rumoured royal quadrangle involving the Queen's 2 eldest children. The relationship shows that for the determined, forthright Anne, there was to be no settling in her pursuit of happiness, even for the sake of appearances.
There's very much a sense of, well, if a guy can do it, why can't I with Princess Anne?
She saw in Andrew Parker Bowles someone who was slightly dangerous, if you like, but also great fun. And I think it showed there was an element of that life, and to see where that might lead her.
This risky romance did not sit well with the palace, and perhaps, as with previous lovers, this was also part of the appeal.
So I think even at this very early stage in Anne's life, we can really see her strong character coming through. She doesn't seem concerned about etiquette. From the palace's point of view, she's quite interested in men who are a bit different, who have got a little bit of a reputation.
He would have been a complete no-no for the royal family. Apart from the promiscuity, the big issue with Andrew Parker Bowles was that he was a Catholic.
This is one detail that Anne would have to consider. For the pair to marry, Anne would likely have to withdraw from the line of succession.
Princess Anne was never going to try and break that particular rule, but that worked in her favour in a sense because she wanted to have fun without the pressure to turn that fun into a sort of formal relationship or even marriage.
As scandalous as the relationship may have been, once again, the notoriously private princess miraculously kept it under wraps from the public.
When she and Charles would go to breakfast, they would voraciously scan the paper for any of the little tidbits that the papers had published about them. They wanted to know what they'd figured out. You know, had that relationship been kept secret?
I think this revelation really has come about because of the Netflix show, The Crown. And I think a lot of people were quite shocked. I think a lot of people had to check on Google if this was actually true.
How do you know all this? Because I was briefly caught up in it myself.
Wait a minute. When?
Then, in the past, it doesn't matter. It was all very straightforward. He got what he wanted, which was to make Camilla jealous. I got what I wanted, which was a bit of fun.
Fun?
Yes, sorry, Mummy, it was.
The private conversations can still only be imagined, but the story of this extraordinary relationship was a revelation to most.
She really was besotted with Andrew Parker Bowles. I think after a couple of years of Anne really chasing him, she realised that, you know, he was only really going to make her unhappy. The press were getting more interested, and of course the long shadow cast by his Catholicism and his promiscuity.
It's understood when Andrew was posted to Germany, it firmly put an end to things. But despite their complicated past, Anne has kept this ex especially close.
Andrew is a godfather to Zara. He's remained a firm friend of Princess Anne's for the best part of 50 years. So, no, I don't think there was any ill will on Anne's part towards his marriage for Camilla.
After the dangerous liaison with Andrew, Anne once again sought out a quieter, less colourful partner. And again, she chose one.
He was a member of the Queen's Dragoons. Of course, you know, another dashing